What's up guys, it's Paraly5er here, and today we're going to be updating our grounded armor tier list for 1.3. Now obviously no new armors were added in 1.3, but there were a lot of changes to current armor sets in the game, so we're going to rebalance this tier list to see what I think and how my opinions have changed. Now to start off with here, we have the tier 1 armor sets and pieces. Now I have put everything back in its place where I had it in my previous video, and just like all our other tier lists we've done, we're going to go through, talk about why they are all in their current tiers, and then we're going to look at the armor pieces that have been edited and changed inside of 1.3 and move them around to where we want them to be. First, we have the gas mask, which is in A tier. It's pretty self-explanatory, this one. It deserves to stay in A tier, I think. It's just good for going into the haze. It protects you against gas. It's really one of the only ways to do it. Gastro Goo's the other option, but that's obviously much more expensive. So I think the gas mask stays in A tier. Also gives you that explosive resistance when equipped, so if you do want it down the sleek path, it can be quite useful in the late game. We then have the red ant armor, which is in A tier. This is because it increases carry capacity, but the main ability of this is when you wear the full set, you can go into the red ant hill without being attacked, which is very, very useful in the early game. If you're trying to loot the nest, this will allow you to do it very easily without worrying about taking down the entire nest. The gill tube is in B. While not an amazing piece of armor, it does massively increase your time underwater, so for that reason, I think it has to stay here. The fin flops plus I had in C. Now I'm actually going to move these up to B tier and put the fin flops regular in C tier. These things, I don't wear them. I'll be honest, I don't. But I know that a lot of people like using them, particularly in, say, medium difficulty. Once you're into the late game, you can equip both of these, but typically in the mid to early game, I don't like combining the two of these together. I don't think it's a good idea because it makes you very vulnerable underwater unless you're running some very, very heavy chest plate. And even with a heavy chest plate, you're very much in danger of dying very quickly, so I don't like combining these two, but I do understand that in the late game, if you're on medium, for example, a lot of people like to run these two combined for the extra speed and time underwater, although, you know, you're going to get the bubble helmet eventually, which gives you even more defense. I'm going to leave the eye patch in C tier because it's the eye patch. It increases the damage you take while also increasing the damage you deal, but it's not much of an increase to the damage you deal, so I just don't find it worth it. And then the might hat stays in D because it's just not that good. There's no set bonuses. The bonuses that it does give you, the effects are just not good at all. It's just not a good piece of armor. It really isn't. Now let's take a look at the changes that were made to the armor sets that are not currently in the tier list. Now previously the acorn armor was in S tier. The change made to this in 1.3 is the set crafting ingredients are changed to require the player to venture into other tier 1 biomes. Now what this means is the recipe for the chest plate was changed to require berry chunks now, and the recipe for the leggings were changed to require algae. Now, in my honest opinion, it stays in S tier. I don't think this makes it massively different. Sure, you have to travel to the hedge and travel to the pond to get these items, but you don't have to complete the labs or anything. You just have to go into them and grab a couple of items and then run back to your crafting bench. It doesn't really change the recipe that much. It doesn't make it that much more difficult to craft, and it still has the same high defense capabilities as before, making it still, in my opinion, the best tier 1 armor. Next we have the aphid slippers. Now obviously the sleek effect on these was changed. It used to reduce the stamina used while sprinting, and they changed it to a new effect called ImCade, which actually makes it now so that if you go near aphids with it equipped, they're not going to run away. Now this did in the playtest used to work on scarabs, however that is no longer the case. Scarabs do now see you as hostile when you have these equipped. These were previously in S tier. I'm going to keep them in S tier, although I will say I don't like the new sleek effect. I think it is pretty useless, if I'm honest. But I would still say that they are very, very useful for speeding you up around the yard, and I do like using them a lot. But yeah, if they would have been S plus before, they're now like a bit of an S minus. They definitely aren't as good as they were previously, but I still think they are useful to carry if you've got that free inventory slot, just so you can travel even quicker around the yard. I don't typically use them on low, but on medium and below they are very useful as you don't have to worry about risking your life when you have them equipped. Next we have the grub armor. So this armor was changed. Now the status effect makes it so that you do more damage to tier 1 creatures while you have this armor equipped. Now this effect is pretty nice, and I previously had this armor in B tier. I'll move it up to 80. I know a lot of people value the stamina that this armor gives you, and now that it increases your damage to tier 1 creatures, it's going to be really good, considering it's a medium armor set, for taking down some creatures in the early game with that increased damage. It's also going to help speed up your playthroughs if you do end up using this. The one drawback to this armor, which I will always say, is that it is very expensive to craft, in the sense you got to dig up a lot of grubs. And, you know, it just takes a while to dig up grubs. The acorn armor is so much faster, you can just break some acorns, it takes a few seconds, and then you've got to run to the pond and run to the hedge. Is it a little bit tedious now because of that running that you have to do? Sure. But I still think it's faster than collecting a full set of grub armor, where you have to dig up like 10, 15 grubs, depending on how lucky you are. And then the final piece of tier 1 armor that was changed is the clover. I had this in C tier previously. The changes made is now that the peace effect has been changed, so that it increases your defense against tier 1 creatures, and the set bonus is changed to trickle regen. I will say this probably brings it up to a B tier set of armor. I think the changes made to it make it a much better armor set than before. Previously, it was to do with refilling your thirst and food, I believe, or not losing them as quickly while you had it equipped. But I think this effect that has now been changed, it's a much, much better effect than previously. So for that reason, it has to go up a tier. Obviously, this armor is really easy to craft. I would still take the other 2 armor sets over it, but I would say it's definitely been improved with the release of 1.3. So for that reason, it's a B tier set of armor now. With the tier 1 sets done, let's move on to the tier 2 sets of armor. Now for the tier 2 armor sets, actually only one set has been changed, which is the Black Ant armor. But first, let's make sure we go through all of the armor we currently have in the list and explain why it's there. Ladybug is in S. It's Ladybug armor. Has one of the best sleek effects in the game. It's one of the best armor sets in the game. I could use this all the way to complete the game. It is literally that good. Spider armor in A. Pretty effective set. Poison isn't as good as it once was, but I would still say it's very good for its stamina effects. Bubble Helm in A, obviously. The best way to traverse the underwater areas of the map, gives you the most breathing time. Koi in B, I'm going to actually move it up to an A. The debuff on this thing is just so insanely good. If you parry with a full set equipped, it'll reduce your enemy's defense by 20%, which makes it much, much quicker to kill things. It is, however, very weak defensively, so you have to be extremely skilled if you want to use this armor set, but I will move it up to A as it is pretty cheap to craft and easy to get. Marksman Cap in B, this increases the damage of your bows and crossbows, and I do think it is a really good piece of armor, but it's no higher than B tier because it's only a single piece. It is really cool and does massively boost damage, and bows and crossbows, while I'm not a fan of them, are pretty strong, especially crossbows. So yeah, it is a good piece of armor. I will move the Firefly helmet up to B as well. A lot of people on the last video said I should have put it higher. While it does provide good defense, actually more than the Ladybug helmet, I just don't find myself using it that much. It's only good if you're caving and using two-handed weapons, which I don't really do, to be completely honest. I'll just pull out a torch, especially the Ever Charcoal torch. Just makes my life so much easier, to be completely honest. But I will say that this thing is pretty good until you get the Ever Charcoal torch, and it is slightly easier to make than the torch. B armor stays in D because B armor is trash, and Black Ant armor moves into D where it was previously. Now, the change made to this was that the Thorns damage was doubled, but I don't care. Thorns damage is trash. Still D tier. I hate the Black Ant armor and the B armor. They have probably the worst tier 2 sets of armor by quite some distance, to be completely honest. Now that tier 2's done, pretty quickly as well, let's move on to tier 3. But before we get to tier 3, we have the pet armors in the tier list, which weren't in the tier list previously, so I think we should rank them. It's only fair. Yeah, I don't know. I think someone mentioned this on the last video to rank the pet armors. There you go. This one provides the most defense. This one provides the second most. And these two are tied for third most. What more do you want me to do? There's 4 pieces of pet armor. They don't have any other buffs. They just go from most defense to least defense. There you go. Pet armor has been ranked. Cool. Let's move on to tier 3 armor sets now. Here we are in the tier 3 sets of armor now. Now, 3 of these armor sets were changed. We have the Moldy Matriarch, the Broodmother armor, and the Widow armor. But first, let's go through all of the current armor sets and analyze which ones I do and don't like and which ones I want to move. In S tier, we have the Fire Ant armor. It maintains its S tier status. No need to even question it. The full set bonus provides a little acidic splash. The individual pieces are good to use, and I love this armor set. It's very, very strong, and it stays in S tier. In A tier, we have the Bard's Tutor, a very strong piece of armor, especially if you're a ranged player, and definitely worthwhile using for the additional buffs that it gives. We have the Assassin armor in A tier. Now this one is more difficult to get than the Fire Ant because you do have to beat the Mantis. And I also wouldn't recommend running the full set of this as it is a little too light on the defense for me. But as an individual piece, I'll sometimes run one piece of it and then not run the full set, obviously. Which does give you quite a few good buffs just from having a single piece. It does give you that crit bleed buff, so that when you do crit your enemies, you have a chance to bleed them, and it doesn't reduce your defense by too much. The Fluffy Pupa Hat remains in A tier as well, as this thing increases your carry capacity. It's not needed as much as it previously was due to the Hauling Hero edition, however, I will keep it in A tier as it is still very useful. Also in A tier, we have the Wizard Hat, which is very, very effective with the staves, and it does massively buff them, so for that reason it has to stay in A. Black Ox and Moth armor are going to remain in B tier. Black Ox is a relatively tanky armor set, but it's mostly used for charged attacks, which I almost never use, and so for that reason it will stay here. The Moth armor is very similar. I don't really use ranged much, but the bleed from this armor is extremely strong, and it's very worthwhile using. Antlion is in C tier. Now, the reason it's in C tier is that its effects aren't really that good. Obviously, it does counter the sizzle, and you do need this armor if you want to go to the sizzling areas. I will move it up to B tier purely based on the fact that you do need it for the sizzle. However, it's not really my go-to armor. The sleek effect from it is Thirst Drain, which is horrible. It can, however, be good if you want to use it as the set bonus. It reduces the debuff that you get when shooting a crossbow. So, for that reason, I will move it up to B. However, I don't really use it much unless I'm going into the sizzling areas. It is also good, of course, for the Kultana defense. The Roly-Poly armor will stay in C. Now, some people love it, some people hate it. Personally, I leave it in C. It is the tankiest set of armor that is tier 3. However, there are two other armor sets in tier 3 that have the exact same defense. But the Roly-Poly armor has horrible, horrible piece effect and set effect and sleek effect. None of them are really that good, so for that reason, it can't really go up for me. Wasp armor's moving down to D tier. This armor's probably the worst armor set in the game. I never, ever, ever craft it. I don't rate it whatsoever. Maybe someone can change my mind, but I just don't think it's good. The Termite armor was previously in C. It's moving up to S to me. Now, there's a very small fine print here, and that's that it's only good if you use it with the Firefly goo. Now, it's always been pretty good prior to 1.3, but in 1.3, the Giddy Goop trinket was added, and now if you have that equipped and you have this chestplate equipped, it's going to massively decrease any enemy's attack speed that you're fighting, making it a lethal combination and one of the best combos in the game right now, which is why this armor's gone all the way from C to S tier. It is so much better. It is a light armor, so it's slightly risky to use, but if you combine it with a piece of a Fire Ant and a piece of, say, Mother Demon armor, then you're going to have relatively high defense, definitely enough to keep you alive. Now we move on to the armor pieces that were changed in 1.3. Let's start with the regular Mother Demon armor. The change made to this is that previously the helmet was equivalent of a heavy piece, but it was a medium piece, and then the chestplate and leggings were equivalent to light pieces, but they were medium pieces. It was very confusing. Now they've all been changed to heavy pieces with increased durability. Previously, this was a B tier set of armor. I am going to move it up to S tier. It's the best heavy tier 3 armor set, first of all. Second of all, when you upgrade it down the sleek path, it's going to apply poison and venom to your enemies. I just really like using this armor. I really like the defense it provides. I'll almost always run one piece of the Mother Demon armor, purely because I will be running the Termite chestplate, so my defense is quite low, and running a piece of this allows me to inflict poison and venom while also maintaining a very high defense. So for that reason, I think it is one of the best sets. I would say, however, I don't recommend you run the full set, because I don't think the set bonus is worth it. I think it's better just to run a single piece, and then run a single piece of Fire Ant along with the Termite chestplate. Next, we have the Moldy Matriarch set, obviously the hardest set of armor to get in the game. Previously, I had it in D tier, which is the lowest rank. Now, what have they changed? The full set has increased damage resistance and durability, and it is now considered heavy armor. They doubled the chance of Dynamite proccing. The Dynamite explosive resist down buff duration was halved. The explosive stun has been replaced with big boom. Explosive attacks have a chance to provide a stacking crit damage buff. Did this armor get buffed? Yes. I'm going to move it to C. It's just one of those armor sets, you get it at the very end of the game. You have to farm the infected broodmother a few times just to get it. And by the time you've got it, you've already done everything there is to do in the game. There's not really much you're going to use it for if you're good enough to beat the infected broodmother. Is it cool to mess around with? Sure. But until there's more progress to be made in the game, like behind that door in 1.4, then I just don't see myself using it right now. So for that reason, I'm leaving it in C. It's gone up a tier, but I still don't think it's massively worth crafting. Now we have the final item, the Black Widow armor. Previously, I had the Widow armor in A tier. Now, what's been changed about it, you may ask? The set bonus has changed. So the Peace and Sleek bonus is still the same. You still get parry poison, but the set bonus is different now. The old set bonus made it so that when you got a kill, your movement speed was massively increased. The new set bonus is when you get a kill, you get trickle regen and attack speed increase. Now, when it says trickle regen, it means insane regen. This is in S tier. If you run a full set of this, if you've tried it, whether it's sleek or bulky, you are going to be at risk of taking a lot more damage. However, when you kill an enemy, the regen you get is so unbelievably insane that you don't even understand. It gives you 15 HP per second for 10 seconds. Let that sink in. That means when you kill an enemy, it's pretty much going to heal you to full over the next 10 seconds. I think you have about 205 health in the game. Once you have all your molars maxed out, if you don't have meat shield. So this thing's healing 150 over the course of 10 seconds. At 15 a second. Just for killing a single creature. Now, I will say this armor set won't be good in boss fights, particularly, because you're fighting just you and the boss, so you're not going to be getting kills to proc the set bonus. Obviously, some boss fights have exceptions because there's summons and stuff, but you get the gist. However, I would say this will be very, very useful running around the yard. You won't have to carry things like bandages with you, because you'll just get a kill and boom, you'll regen all the way back up to full health. This thing is insanely good, especially if you combine it with the Sour Battle Axe, as the armor set bonus is increasing your attack speed, and then the bonus of the Sour Battle Axe is increasing your attack speed, and you're like the Flash, you just attack at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Yeah, this armor set definitely got buffed. I think this tier list has changed a lot since previous. There's a lot more stuff in that S tier that is tier 3, which is nice to see them getting buffs. But yeah, that's going to call it for today's video. If you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like on it. I'll see you in the next Grounded video. Have a great rest of your day.